I'm Michael. I'm 34 years old, and I watched my own mother choose her monstrous, wealthy husband over my abused 6-year-old daughter. Before I tell you how a hidden journal from my dead wife brought his entire empire of lies crashing down, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It helps to know I'm not just talking into the void. It all started, as so many family disasters do, with the forced smiles and simmering resentments of Thanksgiving. For 2 years since a car accident stole my wife, Sarah, from me and our daughter, Lily, I'd managed to avoid this particular nightmare. I made every excuse I could think of. A looming deadline at the high school where I teach. A sudden, unshakable flu. Anything, absolutely anything, to keep me and Lily out of that house. Her house. My mother's house, which no longer felt like home. It was his house now. Victor's. My mother, Patricia, had married him just 6 months after my own father, a quiet, gentle man, passed away from a heart attack. The speed of it left me breathless. Victor was everything my father wasn't. Loud, slick, and dripping with a kind of wealth that announced itself the moment he entered a room. He was a real estate developer with a portfolio as big as his ego. To my mother, who had spent her life worrying about bills, he wasn't just a man. He was a rescue raft. He'd wrap her in a cashmere hug, his expensive cologne filling the air, and I could physically see the tension leave her shoulders. She was safe, secure. He was the answer to prayers she'd been whispering for 30 years. To me, he was a walking, talking red flag. His charm was like a thin layer of oil on murky water. It looked shiny, but you knew something unclean was lurking just beneath the surface. But this year, my mother had been relentless. Her calls became more frequent, her voice tighter with that familiar, weaponized blend of pleading and guilt. "Michael, it's been long enough," she'd insisted, her voice cracking just enough to be effective. "We are a family. You can't keep Lily away from her family, from her grandmother, or from her grandfather." Grandfather. The word felt like swallowing broken glass. Victor wasn't her grandfather. He was a stranger who had taken my father's chair at the head of the dinner table and replaced his worn, comfortable presence with something cold and polished. Against every screaming instinct in my body, I finally caved. I told myself it was just for a few hours. I could do it for Lily, so she could see her grandmother, her Uncle Thomas, my younger, more successful lawyer brother, and his family. I could grit my teeth, swallow my pride, and survive. I was wrong. The moment we walked through the door, the air was thick with the smell of roasting turkey and manufactured joy. Victor greeted me with a hearty slap on the back that felt less like a welcome and more like a brand. "Michael, glad you could make it, son. And look at this little princess." He swooped down towards Lily, his smile wide and predatory. I felt her tiny hand grip mine, her knuckles white. She tried to hide behind my leg, clutching the little worn stuffed fox Sarah had given her months before she died. It was her shield, her armor. "A little shy today, are we?" Victor chuckled, but his eyes, for a split second, were cold and hard. My brother, Thomas, gave me a look from across the room, a look that conveyed a whole paragraph. "Seriously? Get your kid under control." Dinner was the main event, the stage for the implosion. My mother, fluttering around the table, pointed to an empty chair. "Lily, honey, come sit over here. You can sit on Grandpa Victor's lap after we eat, and he'll read you a special story." The smile on Victor's face broadened. He patted his knee, a king on his throne summoning a subject. "Come on, sweet pea. Don't you want to hear about the brave little knight who slays the dragon?" Lily froze solid. It wasn't just shyness. Her entire small body went rigid. She looked from his smiling face to the waiting chair, then up at me, her brown eyes wide with a terror so profound, so absolute, it hollowed me out. It was a fear that had no place on a child's face. She leaned in, her body trembling against mine, and her voice was so quiet, so fragile. It was barely a breath against the skin of my ear. "Daddy," she whispered, "I don't want to sit. It'll hurt. It'll hurt." The world stopped. The clatter of my mother's fine china, the drone of the football game on the TV in the den, the sound of my own breathing. It all vanished into a dull, rushing roar. The only thing in the universe was that tiny, broken whisper. I didn't understand it yet, not completely. My mind was scrambling for a rational explanation. A stomach ache? Did she scrape her knee? But my heart knew better. I looked at the terror in her eyes and I believed her. Instantly, unequivocally. I scooped her up in one smooth motion, her little legs wrapping around my waist as if she were trying to climb inside me to hide from the world. "She'll sit with me," I announced, my voice flat and cold, cutting through the cheerful chatter. I walked to the other side of the table and placed her in the chair next to mine, creating a physical barrier with my own body. The smile fell from Victor's face like a mask. My mother's jaw tightened, her perfectly applied lipstick forming a thin, hard line. A crack had just appeared in their perfect family portrait, and I was the one holding the hammer. I didn't know it then, but I was about to bring it down. The rest of the dinner was an exercise in pure tension. Felt like sitting on a time bomb, counting down the seconds. I could feel their collective gaze on me, heavy and suffocating. Victor's glare was a physical force, a silent promise of retribution. My mother kept shooting me these looks of deep, theatrical disappointment, as if my simple act of protecting my child was a personal betrayal of her. Thomas and his wife, Elaine, were engaged in their own silent conversation, a series of raised eyebrows and tight smiles that clearly communicated their shared annoyance. They were all on the same team, and I had just declared myself the opposition. I didn't care. My entire world had shrunk down to the small, trembling girl beside me. I kept a hand on her back the entire time, my thumb rubbing small, soothing circles. It was a message meant only for her. "I'm here. You're safe. I've got you." We ate in a blur. I shoveled food onto her plate and into my mouth, not tasting any of it. The rich, savory flavors of Thanksgiving might as well have been cardboard. The second I deemed it socially acceptable, I pushed my chair back. "Long day," I muttered, the lie feeling flimsy and transparent. "Lily's exhausted. She just needs to learn some manners, Michael," my mother said, her voice clipped. She was already clearing plates, her movements sharp and angry. "You can't just let her run the show. She's 6, Mom. And Victor was only trying to be nice," she added, her back to me. "He adores her." I didn't have the strength to argue. The fight hadn't even started yet, and I was already bone-tired. I just grabbed our coats from the closet, my hands fumbling with the hangers. I knelt down and zipped up Lily's jacket, my eyes meeting hers. I tried to give her a reassuring smile, but I'm sure it looked more like a grimace. We walked out the front door without another word. The cold November air hit me like a physical slap, a welcome shock to my overheated system. It was clean and sharp, a stark contrast to the cloying, toxic atmosphere we just left behind. The drive home was wrapped in a thick, heavy silence. The streetlights painted fleeting stripes across the car's interior. I kept glancing at Lily in the rearview mirror. She was just a small, still shape in her car seat, staring blankly out the window, her stuffed fox held in a death grip against her chest. What was going on in her little head? What kind of pain was she talking about? My mind raced, cycling through every possible innocent explanation. Maybe she had a rash. Maybe she was constipated. Maybe she'd fallen at school and hadn't told me. I clung to these possibilities like a drowning man to a piece of driftwood, because the alternative, the darker, colder possibility that was creeping into the edges of my mind, was too monstrous to contemplate. The thought of Victor's hands on my daughter, no, couldn't be. People like him didn't exist in my family. We got back to our small, 2-bedroom apartment. It had been our sanctuary since Sarah died, the one place in the world that felt entirely ours. But tonight, the silence felt different. It was heavy with unspoken dread. I knew I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't just put her to bed and pretend that whisper hadn't happened. "Lilybug," I said, my voice coming out softer and shakier than I intended. "Let's get you ready for your bath. You can tell me if something's bothering you. Okay? You can tell Daddy anything." She just gave a small, silent nod. I led her into the bathroom, the bright, cheerful yellow of the walls feeling like a cruel joke. I helped her out of her fancy Thanksgiving dress, my movements slow and deliberate. And as I slid her tights down her small legs, I saw it. And my world ended. On her delicate porcelain skin, just at the edge of where her underwear sat, were bruises. They weren't the messy, splotchy bruises of a fall. They were distinct, symmetrical, the unmistakable, sickening shape of fingerprints. An adult's fingerprints. The air rushed out of my lungs in a silent gasp. The yellow walls seemed to pulse and swim before my eyes. A wave of nausea, hot and acidic, rose up from my stomach, so intense I had to grip the edge of the sink to keep my legs from buckling. My blood ran cold, then hot, then cold again. It was real. The monster I'd refused to believe in was real, and I had just served my daughter up to him on a silver platter. My first primal instinct was pure, white-hot rage. A murderous, reptilian rage that sang in my blood. I wanted to drive back there. I wanted to smash through that perfect front door and tear him apart with my bare hands. I wanted to see the life drain from his cold, lying eyes. But then I looked at Lily. She was standing there, small and still, watching me. Her eyes weren't filled with fear of me, but a quiet, waiting sadness. She had told me her secret, and now she was waiting to see what I would do. In that moment I knew. She didn't need a monster to fight her battles. She needed her father. I took a deep, shuddering breath, then another, forcing the rage down, packing it into a hard, dense ball in the pit of my stomach. I would use it, but not now. Now was for her. "Okay, baby girl," I said, my voice a strangled wreck. "Let's just get you cleaned up." After her bath, I wrapped her in the fluffiest towel we owned and held her for a long time. I tucked her into bed, surrounded by a fortress of stuffed animals, and read her 3 stories instead of the usual one. Her favorite ones. The ones about brave animals who outsmarted the big, scary ones. I waited, sitting on the edge of her bed, until her breathing was deep and even, until I was sure she was asleep. The moment I closed her bedroom door, the dam of my control broke. I stumbled into the living room, my body trembling with a rage so profound it felt like it was going to tear me apart from the inside. I paced the floor, my fists clenched, my mind a chaotic storm of horror and guilt. My fault. This was my fault. I took her there. I ignored my gut. I let them win. I collapsed onto the couch and pulled out my phone, my fingers fumbling. My first call wasn't to the police. I didn't know what to say yet. I needed an anchor. I needed Rebecca. Rebecca had been Sarah's best friend, her other half. Now she was my lifeline. A pediatric nurse. She was practical, sharp, and fiercely loyal. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, Mike," she said, her voice light and cheerful. "How was dinner with the outlaws? Did you survive?" "Rebecca," I choked out. The single word was all I could manage. It was a plea. "I need you." The lightness in her voice vanished, replaced by instant concern. "What is it? What's wrong?" I told her everything. Lily's whisper, the drive home, the bruises. My voice cracked and broke as I spoke, the ugly words spilling out of me. On the other end of the line, there was a sharp intake of breath, followed by a dead, heavy silence. "I'm on my way," she said, her voice suddenly made of steel. "Don't do anything. Don't call them. Don't move. Just wait for me. And Mike, you did the right thing leaving. You hear me?" While I waited, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. A text message. It was from Thomas. "Mom is hysterical. What the hell is your problem? You embarrassed the whole family." I stared at the words, a bitter, humorless laugh escaping my lips. Embarrassed the family. That was his first thought. Not about Lily. Not about what could possibly make a 6-year-old so terrified. Their reputation. Their perfect, curated image. The phone buzzed again. A call this time. My mother. I let it go to voicemail. It immediately rang again. I knew she wouldn't stop. I finally answered, putting it on speakerphone, my hand shaking. "Michael, what is wrong with you?" she shrieked, her voice high and frantic, not with worry, but with anger. You walk out of here without a word. You upset Victor terribly. You've absolutely ruined Thanksgiving. Mom, I started, my voice dangerously low and quiet. Something happened to Lily. Oh, don't be so dramatic. She was just throwing a tantrum because you've spoiled her rotten ever since Sarah. Ever since the accident. The way she used my wife's death as a weapon sent a fresh jolt of fury through me. Victor was only trying to be nice. He's a good man. He's been so good to us, to this family. You have no idea the things he does for me. I could hear the unspoken words hanging in the air. The things he pays for. The mortgage. The country club membership. The sense of security she craved more than anything. That's what she was defending. Not a man, but a lifestyle. He hurt her, Mom, I said, the words tasting like poison. There was a split-second pause. Don't you dare say that, she hissed, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. Don't you dare accuse a man like that, a good, generous man, just because you're jealous of my happiness. You need to call him and apologize right now. Before I could even process the depth of that betrayal, a new voice cut in. Thomas. He must have been on the line with her. Mike, listen to me, and listen carefully, he said, his tone shifting from angry brother to condescending lawyer. Whatever you think happened, you're wrong. You're emotional. You're not thinking clearly. If you make this a bigger deal than it is, you are going to regret it. I mean it. I'm a lawyer. I know how these things go. You'll be the one who looks crazy, and I will personally make sure of that. I hung up. I just dropped the phone on the couch. I stared at it, my ears ringing. A threat. My own brother had just threatened me to protect that monster. My own mother had accused me of being jealous. Rebecca arrived then, letting herself in with the spare key I'd given her years ago. She took one look at my face and didn't need to ask what had happened. They called, didn't they? She said, her voice grim. I just nodded, unable to speak. I felt hollowed out, a building reduced to its foundation. They're not on our side, I whispered, the words feeling stupid and obvious as I said them. Rebecca came over and put her hands on my shoulders, forcing me to look at her. Her eyes were blazing with a fury that matched my own. They were never on your side, Mike, she said softly, but with an iron certainty. They're on his, which means we're on our own. Now you're going to pick up that phone and you are going to make the call. For Lily. I looked from her determined face to the closed door of Lily's bedroom. She was right. The battle lines had been drawn. It was us against them. I picked up my phone again, my finger hovering over the green icon. This was it. This was the moment there was no coming back from. I was about to declare war on my own family. For Lily. For Sarah. For the splintered wreck of what our lives had become. I pressed the call button. 911, what's your emergency? A calm voice asked. And through a throat tight with grief and rage, I began to speak. The next few hours were a surreal, out-of-body experience. It felt like watching a movie of someone else's life, a gritty, low-budget crime drama. The first to arrive were two police officers. One was a kind-faced, middle-aged man named Williams, whose gentle demeanor was a small island of calm in my chaotic world. The other was a sharp, no-nonsense woman in a plain suit who introduced herself as Maria, a caseworker from Child Protective Services. They sat at my small kitchen table, the one Sarah and I had bought at a flea market, and listened. I recounted the evening, my voice starting out shaky and then gaining a strange, detached clarity as I focused on the facts. The dinner, the whisper, the bruises. Rebecca stood by my side the whole time, a silent, solid presence. She would occasionally clarify a timeline or a detail, her nurse's training kicking in, but mostly she was just there, a human anchor keeping me from floating away into the stratosphere of panic. They didn't question my story. They didn't look at me with suspicion. They just listened, their faces impassive but their eyes filled with a grim, weary understanding. It was terrifyingly clear this wasn't the first time they'd sat at a kitchen table like this, listening to a story like this. When I was done, the caseworker, Maria, looked at me with genuine empathy. Mr. Taylor, I know this is incredibly difficult, but we'll need to speak with Lily. We'll be very gentle. Would that be okay? My first instinct was to say no, to shield her from any more trauma. But I knew it was necessary. I nodded numbly. She's asleep. It's better if we don't wake her right now, she said. We can coordinate with the Child Advocacy Center for a formal interview tomorrow. For tonight, the most important next step is a forensic examination at the hospital. Officer Williams will escort you. They have a specialized team there. Forensic examination. The words were so clinical, so cold. They hung in the air, a testament to the horror that had breached the walls of our lives. While I got Lily, who thankfully stirred but didn't fully wake, bundled into her coat, my phone began its relentless assault. Voicemails from my mother, each one more hysterical than the last. Michael, the police are here. What did you do? They're asking for Victor. You've ruined us. Then, texts from Thomas, each one colder and more menacing than the one before. You have no idea what you've just done. I am warning you. Stop this now or I will make you stop. And then the one that made my blood run cold. You're an unstable parent. I will see to it that you lose custody. He was already building his case. He wasn't just defending a criminal. He was actively trying to destroy me. At the hospital, we were ushered through a side door, away from the chaos of the main emergency room, into a quiet wing that was clearly designed for cases like ours. The walls were painted with cartoon animals and cheerful rainbows, a pathetic and heartbreaking attempt to soften the horror of why children were brought there. We met Dr. Olivia Chen, the specialist on call. She had a calm, soothing voice and a kindness in her eyes that immediately made me trust her. She spoke to me and Rebecca for a few minutes, explaining the process in a way that was both professional and humane. While Lily was with Dr. Chun and a specialized nurse, Rebecca and I sat in the sterile waiting room. I couldn't stop pacing. My mind was a frantic slideshow of horrible images. Lily's terrified face, the bruises on her skin, my mother's furious expression, my brother's threatening texts. I felt trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. They're going to twist this, I said to Rebecca, the words tumbling out. They're going to say I'm crazy, that I'm still grieving. They have money, connections. Thomas is a lawyer. What do I have? Rebecca stopped my pacing, putting her hands on my shoulders. You have the truth, Mike, she said fiercely. And you have a little girl who was brave enough to tell it. That's more powerful than all their money. After what felt like a lifetime, Dr. Chun came out to meet us. Her face was grave. The physical evidence is consistent with recent, non-accidental trauma, she said, her voice low and precise. I've documented everything. The photographs and my report have been sent to the detective in charge of your case. She handed me a stack of pamphlets and cards. Support groups, therapists who specialized in child trauma, legal aid services. It was a roadmap for a journey I never, ever wanted to take. We got home just as the first gray light of dawn was breaking through the clouds. I carried a sleeping Lily inside and laid her gently in her bed. I stood there for a long time, just watching her breathe. Her face, so peaceful in sleep, was a stark contrast to the ugliness that had invaded our lives. This was my fault. A voice in my head, cold and cruel, whispered the words. I had taken her there. I had ignored my gut feeling about Victor for 2 years. I had trusted, even for a second, that my family would put a child's safety before their own comfort. The guilt was a physical weight, a crushing pressure on my chest. But then, another feeling started to bubble up through the guilt and despair. Rage. Cold, hard, clarifying anger. They had chosen their side. They had chosen him. Fine. Now I would choose mine. My side was this little girl, sleeping in her bed, and I would burn their whole world to the ground to keep her safe. The next day, the war officially began. I got a call from Detective Williams. Victor had been brought in for questioning that morning. And just as he'd promised, my brother Thomas had been right there with him, acting as his legal counsel. Victor had denied everything, of course. He'd spun a masterful tale of a vindictive, unstable son-in-law, still reeling from the death of his wife, trying to lash out and sow chaos in the family. He claimed Lily was being coached by me, that she was an imaginative child prone to making things up. Without a confession, the detective said, his voice laced with frustration. It's going to be a tough road. It becomes a case of a 6-year-old's word against a respected member of the community. That's when it hit me. I couldn't just be a grieving father anymore. I couldn't just be reactive. I had to be a fighter. I had to be a detective. I had to find something, anything, that would corroborate Lily's story and tear down the facade Victor had so carefully built. But where to even start? My mind was a frantic blur. I paced my small apartment, the walls feeling like they were closing in. I looked around at the life Sarah and I had built, now just a collection of objects she would never touch again. My eyes scanned the room, desperate for, I didn't even know what, an answer, a clue, anything. And then I saw it, tucked away on the top shelf of the bookshelf, covered in a thin layer of dust. Sarah's old laptop. She had used it for her personal writing, her private journals. After she died, I couldn't bring myself to even open it. The thought of reading her words, of hearing her voice in my head without her being there, was too painful. It felt like a part of her I wasn't ready to face. It had sat there for 2 years, a silent monument to a life cut short. But now, a desperate, illogical idea started to form in my exhausted mind. Sarah was smart. She was perceptive. She had never liked Victor. She tolerated him for my mother's sake. But I remembered the way she used to watch him when he thought no one was looking. Her eyes would narrow slightly, a thoughtful, almost suspicious look on her face. What if she had seen something? What if she'd sensed the rot beneath the polished surface? What if she'd written it down? My hands trembled as I pulled a chair over and carefully took the laptop down. I blew the dust off the silver cover, a small cloud mushrooming into the air. Felt like opening a tomb. I carried it to the kitchen table, plugged in the power cord, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The screen flickered to life, asking for a password. My mind went blank. What would it be? Our anniversary? Lily's birthday? The name of our first pet? I tried them all. Nothing. Password incorrect. Password incorrect. Each rejection felt like a door slamming in my face, mocking my foolish hope. I slumped back in my chair, defeated. It was a stupid idea, a desperate fantasy from a sleep-deprived mind. I sat there for a long time, just staring at the glowing login screen. I thought about Sarah, about us, the little details, the inside jokes that made up the fabric of our life together. I remembered our first apartment, a tiny, cramped place we jokingly nicknamed the Burrow, because it felt so cozy and hidden away. It was our secret password for everything back then, a symbol of our little world against the big one outside. On a whim, I typed it in, followed by the year we met. My breath held tight in my chest. Password accepted. The old, familiar desktop appeared. My heart leaped into my throat. And there, right in the center of the screen, was a single, unassuming folder. It was labeled, simply, for Lily. My heart stopped beating for a second. For Lily. What did that mean? Was it just a collection of photos from her babyhood? Letters for her to read on future birthdays? My hand was shaking so badly I could barely control the laptop's trackpad. With a trembling finger, I clicked it open. The folder contained about a dozen Word documents, mostly letters filled with hopes and dreams for Lily's future. But one file name stood out, its date stamp burning into my brain. It was from just 1 month before the accident. The file was titled, simply, Fears. I held my breath and opened it. The document wasn't a polished, reflective journal entry. It was raw, a chaotic stream of consciousness, a jumble of anxieties and observations that Sarah had clearly needed to pour out of her head before they consumed her. My eyes scanned the first few lines, and the blood in my veins turned to ice. I don't like the way he looks at her, she had written. Victor. Everyone else, especially Patricia, thinks he's Saint Victor, the charming savior who rescued her from grief and financial ruin. But I see something else. When he looks at Lily, it's not grandfatherly. There's no warmth there. It's possessive. It's like she's a beautiful, perfect doll he wants to add to his collection. Something to be owned and controlled. I had to stop and take a breath. She had seen it. The very thing I had brushed off as my own dislike for the man. She had seen it with perfect clarity. I kept reading, my throat tightening with a mixture of grief and vindication. He plays these little games with her. He calls them his secret grandpa games. I walked in on one the other day. He was tickling her on the living room floor. She was squirming, laughing at first, but then she said, "Stop, please." And he didn't. He just held her tighter, his big hand on her stomach, and he whispered, "It's our secret, right? Good girls know how to keep secrets." I made a scene. I snatched Lily up and told him that was enough. He just laughed it off, told me I was being overprotective. Patricia got angry with me later, said I'd embarrassed him. She told me he adores Lily and I need to stop being so paranoid. But my gut is screaming. There is something fundamentally wrong with that man. The words blurred through my tears. Guilt, sharp and suffocating, stabbed at me. Sarah had seen it. She had tried to tell me. I remembered that day. I had told her she was overreacting. I had taken their side. "He's just awkward with kids, honey," I'd said. The memory was a fresh wound. She had been trying to protect our daughter, and I had failed to listen. But the final entry was the one that changed everything. It was the key. I did some digging. It's probably nothing, and Michael would say I'm crazy, but I can't shake this feeling. His first wife. The story is that she died tragically young years ago, but I can't find an obituary. No death certificate online. No record. It's like she vanished. He told Patricia that she was a troubled woman who ran off and abandoned her family. But I found a public record, a divorce filing from 20 years ago in a different state. Her name was Eleanor Vance then. He's lying about her. If he's lying about something that big, what else is he hiding? I think something happened to her. Something he needed to bury. I have to find her. For Lily's sake. I have to know. That was it. That was the last entry. A week later, a truck ran a red light, and Sarah was gone. The police had ruled it a tragic, random accident. But now, reading her words, feeling her fear resonate across time, I wasn't so sure. This wasn't just a journal. It was a dying declaration. It was a roadmap to the truth. It was Sarah, my brilliant, perceptive Sarah, reaching out from beyond the grave, handing me the weapon I needed to win this war. This wasn't just about what Victor did to Lily last night. This was about a pattern, a history of darkness he had expertly concealed for decades. I immediately called Rebecca, my voice shaking as I read her the entries. She was silent on the other end of the line for a long moment after I finished. All I could hear was her soft breathing. "Oh, Sarah," she finally whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Of course she knew. That woman always saw things other people missed. She saw the truth of people. Her grief quickly hardened into steel. "Okay, Mike, this is it. This is our weapon. Eleanor Vance. We have a name. She gave us a name. Let me see what I can find." Rebecca wasn't just a nurse. She was an amateur genealogist and an online sleuth, a skill she'd honed tracking down distant relatives and obscure medical studies. If anyone could find a ghost from 20 years ago, it was her. While she started her digital hunt, I knew I had to do something else. The journal was powerful, but coming from me, they would just say I faked it. Thomas would tear it apart in court, paint it as the desperate forgery of an unhinged mind. I needed an ally, someone on the inside. My thoughts immediately went to Elaine, my brother's wife, a child psychologist, a mother. She had always been polite and kind to me, but she was firmly in their camp. She had stood by her husband, her face a mask of disapproval as I left the dinner. But I remembered that look in her eyes. It wasn't the pure anger of my mother, or the smug certainty of Thomas. It was confusion, discomfort, a flicker of something that looked like doubt. It was a 1-in-a-million shot, a desperate, insane Hail Mary pass into the heart of the enemy's territory. But it was the only play I had left. I sat at my computer for an hour, drafting and deleting messages. What could I possibly say? In the end, I realized words were useless. The only thing that could reach her was the truth. I scanned the pages of Sarah's journal, attached the images to a new email, and typed Elaine's address in the recipient line. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the send button. This could backfire spectacularly. She could hand it right to Thomas, who would use it to bury me. But if there was even a shred of the mother and the psychologist in her, maybe, just maybe, it would be enough. I wrote one single line in the body of the email. Elaine, I know you're a mother. Please, just read this as a mother. I hit send. My heart pounded against my ribs. I had just handed a live grenade to the enemy. Now all I could do was wait and see if she would throw it back at me, or if she would pull the pin herself. The next few days were the longest of my life, a tense, stretched-out waiting game. Rebecca worked tirelessly, falling down rabbit holes of public records and social media. I focused on Lily, creating a bubble of safety and forced normalcy around her. We went to the park. We baked cookies that were mostly just frosting and sprinkles. We did everything I could think of to pretend the world outside our apartment door wasn't a raging storm waiting to break. Lily's therapy sessions with Dr. Chun became our new routine. She rarely spoke about what happened, but her trauma poured out onto paper. She drew pictures of a big, dark house with a little girl trapped in a high window. She drew a man with a wide, smiling face, but his teeth were sharp, like a wolf's. And she drew that one image over and over again. A wooden chair with long, sharp nails sticking out of the seat. It was her way of telling a story she didn't have the words for. Each drawing was a dagger in my heart, but it was also evidence. It was her truth in crayon. Then, one evening, as I was washing the dishes, my phone rang. An unknown number from a different area code. My stomach clenched. Hello. I answered, my voice wary. Is this Michael Taylor? A woman's voice asked. It was hesitant, shaky. A voice that sounded like it hadn't been used for a real conversation in a long time. Yes. Who is this? There was a pause, a shaky intake of breath. My name is Eleanor. I used to be Eleanor Vance. I believe you've been looking for me. My legs went weak with relief. I sat down heavily on a kitchen chair. Rebecca had done it. Sarah had done it. They had found her. Yes, I breathed, my voice thick with emotion. Yes, I have. Thank you for calling me. The phone call with Eleanor, who now lived under the name Susan Jacoby 3 states away, was one of the most terrifying and validating conversations of my life. She was a ghost from Victor's past, and her voice was laced with a fear that was 2 decades old, but still sounded raw and immediate. At first, she was reluctant to talk, her words clipped and wary. I don't know what you want from me, she said. That part of my life is over. I buried it. I'm sorry to make you dig it up, I said, my voice gentle, trying not to spook her. But he's done it again. To my daughter. She's 6. A sharp, pained gasp on the other end of the line. The dam of her fear broke. She told me a story that mirrored our own with chilling, sickening precision. The public charm that masked the private control. The secret games he played with her son, Daniel. The way he'd isolated her from her family and friends, convincing everyone that she was a hysterical, unstable wife. She hadn't had a Sarah to believe her, or a Rebecca to fight for her. She hadn't had the strength or the resources to fight back against a wealthy, respected man. So she'd done the only thing she could think of to save her child. She'd taken her son and run, changing their names, disappearing into the anonymity of a new life. He's a monster, Mr. Taylor, she whispered, her voice breaking into a sob. A monster hiding in plain sight. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry about your little girl. I should have done more. I should have found a way to expose him back then. It's not too late, I said, my own voice tight with emotion. It's not your fault. But we need you now. Your son, Daniel, too, if he's willing. We need you to tell your story. There was a long pause, filled only by the sound of her weeping softly. He ruined my son's childhood, she finally said, her voice gaining a sliver of strength. He won't get to steal another one. For your daughter, and for my son. Yes, we'll do it. Armed with the voice of the past, I felt a tectonic shift. The ground beneath my feet felt solid for the first time in weeks. We weren't alone anymore. We had Sarah's words, and now we had Eleanor's. The walls were closing in on Victor. The first major battle was the custody hearing. It wasn't the criminal trial, but in many ways it was more important. Thomas, in a move of stunning aggression, had filed for temporary emergency custody of Lily. His motion claimed I was an unfit, paranoid parent, that I was emotionally unstable and actively manipulating my child to harm the family. His goal was transparent. Get Lily away from me, silence her, and discredit me so thoroughly that the criminal case would wither and die before it even began. The courtroom was cold, formal, and intimidating. I sat beside my lawyer, Lauren Pierce, a woman with the heart of a lion and the mind of a tactical genius. Across the aisle sat the enemy, my mother, her face a carefully constructed mask of sorrowful righteousness. Victor, next to her, looking every bit the concerned, wrongly accused patriarch. And my brother Thomas, confident and smug, whispering in his own lawyer's ear. It was a grotesque family portrait. Their lawyer was slick, polished, and brutal. He painted a masterful picture of me as a man unraveling from grief, a high school teacher with financial struggles who was jealous of his mother's new, prosperous life. He twisted my love for Lily into a smothering, obsessive paranoia. He was good. He was very good. I could feel the judge's gaze on me, initially sympathetic, now filled with doubt. We were losing. Then it was Lauren's turn. She stood up, calm and composed. Your Honor, she began, her voice clear and strong. The defense has painted a compelling picture of my client as an unstable man. We believe his actions were not born of instability, but of a father's protective instinct. An instinct that was tragically well-founded. We believe he had every reason to be concerned, based on the words of his late wife, Sarah Taylor. She presented the printed-out pages from Sarah's journal. Thomas's lawyer shot to his feet. Objection. Hearsay, Your Honor. These are the unverified, emotional writings of a deceased person. They could be fake. They prove nothing. The judge looked skeptical. Ms. Pierce, this is thin ice. I understand, Your Honor, Lauren said calmly, but it establishes a pattern of concern that predates the events of Thanksgiving. It provides crucial context for my client's actions. And most importantly, it led him to find a witness who is very much alive, and who tells a disturbingly similar story. She then told the court about Eleanor Vance and her son, Daniel. A murmur went through the room. I saw Thomas and Victor exchange a flicker of a look, the first visible crack in their wall of confident denial. But Lauren wasn't done. She let the weight of that revelation settle in the room before she delivered the killing blow. Your Honor, she said, her voice dropping slightly, creating a pocket of intense silence. There is one more person we believe has relevant information, someone who can speak to the current environment in the family home. We would like to call Elaine Taylor to the stand. If the room had been quiet before, it was now utterly, deathly silent. You could hear a pin drop. Elaine Taylor, my brother's wife, their key witness, who was supposed to testify about my erratic behavior. Calling her was a move so audacious, so insane, it took everyone's breath away. Thomas shot to his feet, his face turning a blotchy red. Objection, Your Honor. She is my wife. She is a witness for the defense. She is now a witness for the court, Mr. Taylor, Lauren said simply, without even looking at him. The judge, her expression a mixture of shock and intense curiosity, overruled the objection. Mrs. Taylor, please approach the stand. Elaine looked like a ghost. She was pale, her eyes wide and terrified. She looked at her husband, whose face was contorted in a silent scream of rage and disbelief. She looked at my mother, who was shaking her head frantically, her eyes pleading. Then, she looked at me. Her eyes were filled with tears, but also with a glimmer of resolve. I gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. You can do this. Be a mother. She walked to the stand, her steps unsteady, the rustle of her dress the only sound in the vast, silent room. Lauren approached her gently, as if she were a frightened animal. Mrs. Taylor, Lauren began, her voice soft. You are a licensed child psychologist? Is that correct? Yes, Elaine whispered, her voice barely audible. And you are the mother of an 8-year-old daughter, Sophia? Yes. A few days ago, my client, Michael Taylor, sent you an email. Could you please tell the court what was in that email? Elaine took a shaky breath, her hands twisting in her lap. It was a journal. A copy of a journal from his late wife, Sarah. And what did you do after you read that journal, Mrs. Taylor? This was the moment. The entire case, my entire future with my daughter, hung on her next words. Tears started to stream down Elaine's face. She refused to look at Thomas. I started watching my daughter more closely, she said, her voice gaining a slight tremor of strength. I started remembering things, small things I had dismissed. The way she would flinch sometimes when Victor came near. How she suddenly stopped wanting to go to Grandma's house for sleepovers. I told myself it was just kids being kids. She paused, swallowing a sob that shook her whole body. After I read what Sarah wrote, I sat down with Sophia. I asked her about Grandpa Victor. I asked her about his secret grandpa games. The air in the courtroom crackled with electricity. Victor had gone chalk white. My mother looked like she was going to faint. And what did your daughter tell you, Mrs. Taylor? Lauren asked softly, her voice filled with a gentle, heartbreaking patience. Elaine finally looked up. She didn't look at the judge or at Lauren. Her gaze found mine across the room. Her voice, when it came, was no longer a whisper. It was clear, strong, and utterly devastating. It was the sound of a world breaking. She told me everything, Elaine said. She told me he hurt her, too. Chaos. Absolute, unadulterated chaos erupted. Thomas let out a strangled, animal sound of pain. My mother gasped, a hand flying to her mouth, a look of pure horror on her face. Victor shot up from his chair, his mask of civility finally shattering, his face purple with rage. She's lying, he screamed, his voice a guttural roar. They're all lying. The little brat is lying. His own lawyer had to physically grab his arm and pull him back down into his seat. The judge slammed her gavel down, her voice booming over the pandemonium. Order, order in this court. But it was too late. The truth, ugly and undeniable, was out. The family's wall of lies had been completely and irrevocably shattered, not by a lucky accident, but by a mother's fierce love, awakened by the words of another mother reaching out from beyond the grave. Sarah had done it. She had saved them both. The judge immediately called for a recess, her face a thundercloud of fury directed squarely at Victor and his legal team. The courtroom, which seconds before had been a silent pressure cooker, exploded into a cacophony of shocked whispers and frantic movements. Bailiffs moved in to restore order. I just sat there, my body feeling strangely light, my ears ringing with the echo of Elaine's words. She told me he hurt her, too. It was a victory, a monumental one, but it tasted like ash in my mouth. Another child, my own niece. The scope of his depravity, of the darkness he had harbored behind his grandfatherly smile, was wider and deeper than I could have ever imagined. Lauren put a steadying hand on my arm. Her knuckles were white where she gripped my sleeve. We won, Michael, she said, her voice low and intense. They have nothing left. It's over. I looked over at the other side of the aisle. It was a scene of utter demolition. Elaine was being shielded by a female bailiff, sobbing into her hands. Thomas was standing frozen, his face as white as a sheet, staring at his wife as if she were a complete stranger who had just set fire to his life. This was the end of his perfect career, his perfect family, his perfect image, and it had all imploded in the most public forum imaginable. My mother was the one who moved first, a testament to her priorities. She rushed over, not to Elaine, not to her shattered son, but to Victor. She clutched his arm, looking at him with desperate, pleading eyes, still trying to hold onto the wreckage of the comfortable life he'd given her. Even now, even after hearing that his sickness had spread to her other grandchild, her first instinct was to comfort the monster. It was the most pathetic, most damning thing I had ever witnessed. The judge's decisions came swiftly and brutally after that. She reconvened court only to issue her rulings. Thomas's petition for custody was dismissed with extreme prejudice. A legal term I learned meant the judge was personally disgusted by it. A temporary, and soon-to-be permanent, restraining order was issued against Victor, barring him from coming within 500 feet of Lily or Sophia. The judge also, as required by law, ordered an immediate and full investigation by Child Protective Services into Thomas and Elaine's home. The criminal case against Victor, the detective later told me, was now a slam dunk. As we were leaving the courthouse, navigating a sea of local news reporters who had caught wind of the drama, I saw Thomas corner Elaine in the hallway. Their words weren't loud, but they were sharp and venomous, like shards of broken glass. "How could you?" he hissed, his voice trembling with a barely controlled rage. "You destroyed us. You destroyed our family." For him, he gestured wildly in my direction. Elaine looked up at him. Her tears were gone, replaced by a cold, hard fury I had never seen in her before. It was the fury of a mother bear whose cub had been threatened. "I didn't do this for him, Thomas," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "I did this for my daughter. Something you should have done for your niece from the very beginning." She turned on her heel and walked away, leaving him standing alone in the middle of the hallway, a man who had just lost everything because he had chosen to defend the indefensible. I didn't feel any satisfaction watching him crumble. I just felt empty. That night, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I could actually breathe. It wasn't a full, deep breath of relief. The air was still too thick with the ghosts of what had happened, but it was a start. The immediate threat was gone. Lily was safe. That was the only thing that mattered. Rebecca came over with 2 large pizzas and a bottle of wine she insisted we drink. We didn't celebrate, not really. The victory was too drenched in sorrow. We just sat on my living room floor, watching Lily play with her toys. She seemed lighter, as if a dark cloud that had been following her around had finally dissipated. She was laughing, a real, full-bellied laugh that I hadn't heard in months. It was the most beautiful sound in the world. "I got another call this afternoon," Rebecca said quietly after a while, breaking the comfortable silence. It was from Eleanor Vance. "Susan." She spoke to her son, Daniel. I looked at her, my heart aching for this man I'd never met, this boy whose story had been silenced for 20 years. "He's in his late 20s now," Rebecca continued, her voice soft. "He's a carpenter, married, has a 2-year-old daughter of his own." She paused. "He's willing to testify in the criminal trial, Mike. He said for years he thought he was the only one, that there was something wrong with him. He said he never wants another kid to feel that alone ever again." The final nail. The final, damning nail in Victor's coffin. It was over. The fight was truly over. Later that night, after Rebecca had gone home and Lily was tucked safely in her bed, I went back to my makeshift office in the corner of the living room and opened Sarah's laptop one more time. I read through her journal entries again. Her words no longer just a source of pain and guilt, but a testament to her strength, her perception, her fierce, protective love. She had planted the seeds of his destruction. "Thank you," I whispered to the empty room, to the ghost of the woman I would love for the rest of my life. "I'm sorry I didn't listen sooner. But we got him, Sarah. We finally got him." A few days later, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Elaine. Her voice was tired, but steady. "I'm leaving him," she said, no preamble needed. "I've already filed for divorce. I'm taking Sophia and moving in with my sister in Portland for a while. A fresh start." "I'm sorry, Elaine," I said, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. I was sorry for the life she thought she had, for the family she had lost. "Don't be," she replied, a hint of her old strength returning. "You opened my eyes. It's funny, I spent so long trying to be the perfect daughter-in-law, to fit into that family, to live up to their impossible expectations. But it wasn't a family. It was a fortress built to protect one man's disgusting secrets. You were the only one brave enough to start tearing it down." She paused, and I could hear her take a breath. "Michael, when things settle down, I think it would be good for the girls to see each other. They have a bond. They need each other. I think that would be good too, I said. A bridge was being built over the ruins. A small, fragile one, but it was a start. We had lost a family, but maybe, just maybe, we were starting to build a new one. A year can feel like a lifetime. Or, in our case, it felt like the first year of a new one, scraped together from the ashes of the old. The year that followed the courtroom explosion wasn't about dramatic victories or sudden revelations. It was about quiet, painstaking rebuilding. It was about learning to breathe again. Victor's criminal trial was a formality, a grim but necessary postscript. With the irrefutable testimony of Elaine, the heartbreaking historical account from Eleanor Vance, and the powerful, steady voice of her now-adult son, Daniel, who stood tall and told his story of stolen innocence, the jury was out for less than 2 hours. Victor was convicted on a slew of charges. The judge, a woman who had seen the worst of humanity, looked at him with undisguised contempt as she handed down a sentence that would ensure he would die in prison. He was no longer the charming patriarch, the respected developer. He was just a number in a system, a monster finally locked in a cage where he could harm no one else. My mother, Patricia, was never charged with a crime, but in many ways, she received her own life sentence. The social circles she treasured shunned her. The friends who had once envied her lifestyle now whispered about her behind her back. She lost everything that had mattered to her. Her husband, her financial security, her standing in the community. Most of all, she lost her family. She sold the big house, the one Victor's money had bought, and moved into a small, sad-looking condo across town. She tried to call a few times in the beginning, her messages a rambling, self-pitying mix of blame and pleas for a reconciliation I could never give. I never picked up. There was nothing left to say. The wound was too deep, the betrayal too absolute. Forgiveness was a country I couldn't find on a map. Thomas's life imploded just as spectacularly. His prestigious law firm, deeply embarrassed by the public scandal of one of its partners representing, and then being exposed by a family member in such a sordid case, quietly and firmly pushed him out. His reputation as a brilliant legal mind was in tatters. He and Elaine's divorce was finalized quickly. The last I heard, he'd taken a low-level corporate counsel job in a different state, a ghost of the golden boy he used to be, haunted by the consequences of his own arrogance. But this story isn't about their endings. It's about our new beginning. I took the inheritance my father had left me. Money I'd been too proud and too stubborn to touch while my mother was with Victor, and I sold my small apartment. I bought a house. It wasn't a mansion like Victor's, not even close. It was a small, 3-bedroom craftsman with a slightly crooked porch and a big backyard with an old oak tree perfect for a tire swing. It wasn't big, it wasn't fancy, but it was ours. It was a fortress of a different kind, one built not to hide secrets, but to nurture safety and let the sunlight in. Rebecca, my rock, my co-conspirator, my friend, became a permanent fixture in our new life. She was there for the unpacking of boxes, for assembling furniture with confusing instructions, for movie nights with too much popcorn, for helping Lily with her second-grade homework. She was the calm, steady presence that both Lily and I had come to rely on. Our friendship, which had been forged in grief and tempered in crisis, slowly, naturally, and beautifully blossomed into something more. There was no dramatic declaration. One evening, as we were washing dishes after putting Lily to bed, she simply took my soapy hand in hers and smiled. It wasn't a movie-like moment. It was quiet. It was real. It was right. It felt like coming home after a long, brutal war. Lily and Sophia became the heart of our new, strange family. They were cousins, but their bond was deeper than that. It was forged in a shared, unspoken trauma, but it was being rebuilt with laughter, sidewalk chalk, and whispered secrets about their favorite cartoons. Elaine, having moved back to the area after her divorce, was now a single mom working at a community health clinic. She would bring Sophia over almost every weekend. We'd have barbecues in the backyard. The 4 of us, me and Rebecca, Elaine and Sophia, with Lily in the middle of it all, were a strange, cobbled-together group. We were a family redefined not by blood or marriage certificates, but by choice, by loyalty, and by survival. We even started a new tradition, Therapy Thursdays. After their individual sessions with Dr. Chun, I would take both Lily and Sophia out for ice cream. It was their time. They would sit in the booth, swinging their legs, talking about school, about friends, about whatever was on their minds. They were healing, and they were healing each other. Dr. Chun had a name for it. She called it post-traumatic growth. She explained that sometimes, after the worst things happen, we don't just heal back to who we were before. The trauma changes the landscape of who we are. But if we're lucky, we can grow into someone stronger, more compassionate, more resilient. I saw that growth in Lily every single day. The fear that had lived in her eyes for so long was replaced by a confident spark. Her drawings, once a landscape of dark houses and sharp-toothed monsters, were now filled with vibrant color. She drew pictures of our house, of her and Sophia on the tire swing, of Rebecca teaching her how to bake. The nightmares became less frequent. The laughter became more common. One afternoon, I received a card in the mail. It was a simple, plain card with a Portland postmark. I recognized the neat, determined handwriting. It was from Elaine. Inside, she hadn't written a long letter. There was just a photograph. It was a school picture of Sophia, her hair in pigtails, a wide, gap-toothed, brilliant smile on her face. She looked happy, genuinely happy. On the back of the photo, Elaine had written just 7 words. "Thank you for giving my daughter back her smile." I took a magnet and stuck the photo to our fridge, right next to a crayon drawing from Lily of a sun with a smiley face. It was a reminder of the terrible cost, but also of the incredible reward. We had faced the darkness. We had walked through the fire. And on the other side, we had found the light. Our new life found its comfortable rhythm in the small, ordinary, beautiful moments. The smell of coffee and pancakes on a Saturday morning. The sound of Lily and Sophia's shrieking giggles coming from the backyard as they chased each other around the old oak tree. The comfortable, easy silence between me and Rebecca as we'd sit on the porch swing after the kids were in bed, just watching the fireflies. These were the simple moments that stitched our fractured world back together, thread by thread. For Lily's 8th birthday, we didn't have a big party with dozens of kids. We just had our little group, our family. We went to a local park for a picnic. It was one of those perfect, late summer afternoons. The sky a brilliant, cloudless blue. Rebecca and Elaine laid out a big checkered blanket, piling it high with sandwiches and snacks, while I tried, and mostly failed, to get a cheap kite to catch the breeze, much to the girls' amusement. As Lily was getting ready to blow out the 8 candles on her small cupcake, I happened to glance towards the edge of the park, and I saw her, a figure, standing alone, partially hidden by the shade of a large maple tree. It was an old woman, leaning heavily on a cane, her body stooped. It was my grandmother, Eleanor, the one who had seen and done nothing, the silent witness. She didn't approach. She didn't wave. She just stood there about 100 yards away, watching. Her face, even from that distance, was a canvas of loneliness and regret. My first instinct was a flash of the old, hot anger. What right did she have to be here, to look upon this happiness she had done nothing to protect? But then, looking at her, a frail old woman consumed by her own cowardice, the anger fizzled out, replaced by a profound, weary sadness. Our eyes met across the field. She looked startled, like a wild animal caught in the light. I didn't smile. I didn't wave her over. But I didn't glare either. I just gave her a slow, single nod. It wasn't forgiveness. I didn't have that in me, not for her. But it was an acknowledgement. A final, silent closing of a chapter one no longer needed to read. She seemed to understand. She held my gaze for a moment longer. Then she turned, and slowly, painfully, walked away until she disappeared from view. I turned back to my daughter. She was surrounded by the people who loved her, who would protect her, who had chosen her above all else. She took a deep breath, her cheeks puffed out, and blew out every single candle in one go. We all cheered, our voices loud and happy in the afternoon sun. Later that evening, long after the girls were asleep and the house was quiet, I went into Lily's room just to check on her. Taped to her wall was a new drawing. I'd seen her working on it earlier in the day. It was a picture of our little house with the crooked porch. In front of it, she had drawn 5 stick figures, all holding hands. A man, a woman, and 3 little girls. Me, Rebecca, Elaine, Lily, and Sophia. Over the top, she had drawn a massive, smiling sun, its rays touching each one of us. It was simple. It was perfect. I stood there, looking at that drawing, and I finally understood. Family isn't about blood. It's not about obligation or shared last names. It's about who shows up when the storm hits. It's about who is willing to stand in the fire with you and help you find your way out. We had lost the family we were born into, but we had built a better one in its place. One founded on courage, on truth, and on a love so fierce, so resilient, it could walk through hell and come out on the other side, holding the light. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it has touched you in some way. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect someone you love? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what's next.